question. I wake up at 4 a.m. And they're asking, is it related to grief or sadness? So there is a time clock in TCM, traditional Chinese medicine, where they give every organ like an organ time clock. And what they're saying is the qi flows through the organs at these times. Now, this is also a conundrum thing, something that in classical acupuncture, they have their own different time clock, or they don't think that clock is correct. Now, one of my teachers says something like, even a broken clock is right twice a day, right? Even a broken watch is right twice a day. So because that sort of answers people's, they're like, oh, but what about this? But what about that? It's kind of really obvious with certain things. So I kind of bear that in mind. And it's not people's fault that are TCM practitioners that sort of believe in that, because that's what you were taught. That's what I was taught, that you have that organ clock and that's when the chi's flowing through. So that makes sense in those things. In classical Chinese medicine, waking up in the middle of the night doesn't mean different things at different times. It's just like if someone's waking up at night, that means they've got broken sleep. And it doesn't really matter if you wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock, 5 o'clock. If you're just not getting good quality sleep, then that's not good. So, and it could mean that there could be the same reason for all those different times. Additionally, this person who says they've got grief, or that is it grief or sadness, like if you're going through grief or sadness, you'd know that, right? You're going through something that you're grieving and the sadness there. But if you just happen to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning, I don't know if you're asking, does that mean there's some kind of hidden sadness that I need to address, or hidden grief? I wouldn't go that far. I wouldn't go into Chinese medicine in that way. That sounds a bit too too painful and digging up a can of worms that might not need to be dealt with. Your sleep is supposed to be the resting of your shen, your mind. Now, when you're going through a turmoil, it could be grief or sadness. It could be dealing with a loss. It makes sense that your brain is processing that. And for some people, that happens at night, and that's causing them distress, and that's going to disturb their sleep. So there are points, actually acupressure points that you can use, acupuncture points that can be used to help people process through grief and sadness. And I have a YouTube video actually about that. So you can go on and check that out on YouTube and pressing particular points to do that. It's normal to go through grief and sadness when something has happened, but it's more that we think about things when it's maybe prolonged and it's really disrupting the quality of your life, or you can't move on and you can't let go. And that all definitely relates to the metal element, okay? Letting go, moving on. And for some people that ends up with a hoarding disorder, because they can't move on, they can't let go of anything. And so because they had a grief, maybe 10, 20 years ago, they've got this issue in their life, many years to come. That could be a dysfunction of the metal element for sure. So like a healthy metal element allows us to let go. It allows us to keep things neat and tidy and to realize what's rubbish and what needs to be like kept, and to have that sensible argument within yourself. Sometimes you think, oh, I'd like to keep this, but maybe I shouldn't. Or likewise, people that go to the point of they've got nothing and it just feels empty, that you go to their house and you think, have you just moved in? Oh no, I've been here for months. That's different to being in poverty and not having enough money to buy things. But people that just don't have any belongings or anything, I don't know why I've gotten onto this topic. It's probably wasn't what I intended to get onto. So I'll continue on talking about this, but I want to answer people's questions. That's what I've come on here to do. So if you've got a question, you can answer it. I've put this out to my email people, so I want to just quickly check in case there's an email there. I only sent it out a few hours ago, so I always do that because I don't know when I'm going to have time to do a stream. But yeah, so the metal element in our life allows us to keep what we need to keep, but also to let go of what we need to let go of, to have that discernment. And that is definitely a metal trait, like discernment, knowing, getting into to that characteristic of like spirituality, like metal the metal types of people tend to be very spiritually discerning. So they might even get into that kind of a work, like have a calling to be a minister or a priest of some sort, or some kind of they're often drawn to spirituality. So if you're listening on Instagram and you would like to ask a question, feel free to ask a question. All right. Sinographics D, if you're still there, you can ask a question that you might want to chat about, or let me know how long have you been practicing as an acupuncture doctor in Sri Lanka. What's it like in Sri Lanka? That sounds really interesting. Cool. All right. So some other questions that we wanted to ask, or things I wanted to talk about. I have made a video about yin and yang, masculine and feminine, because this was like a question that was asked. And it's kind of a concept that I've come across lately from some patients, where I was never really taught this in Chinese medicine school, like strictly as a medicine thing, but I think it's definitely a part of the understanding of yin and yang outside of Chinese medicine. This idea of yin is feminine, yang is masculine. But that's actually not a part of Chinese medicine, as in the medicine of it. Like, females have yin, females have yang. Males have yin, males have yang. Yang, if we think about it from a physiological perspective, is function, and yin is form. So both sexes have the same, you could say, have the same amount of yin and yang, because they both have function and they both have form. Just what that function's doing for a female is going to be different to what it's doing for a male. So it's actually the same, but it's easy to think that, oh, men are more yang because it's a male characteristic, or let's say being angry might be I was going to say a male characteristic. That's terrible. I don't want to say that. Being angry might be a yang emotion, whereas sadness might be a yin emotion, and then you have you can sort of maybe infer that male or female. That's not a good place to kind of think about Chinese medicine. I don't think that's really going to lead you anywhere positive in understanding things. So I think it's good to keep that completely separated out. Like, you got to keep them separated. Don't really attach those things in a medical sense. In some other philosophical sense, maybe that works for you. And if it does, let me know. Send me an email, put it in the comments, have a chat in the chat now if you're here and you want to sort of talk about that. That's kind of interesting. All right. So feel free to put a comment. Whenever I do these things, it takes a while for people to come in. And actually, I haven't done one of these streams for a long time, so I understand that it's been a while. It's been a while. So let me get some other questions that we've got. And yeah, maybe some ideas if people want a longer video on something, to sort of have a what do you call it? Discussion about something in the future, or for me to think about it. That's another thing to kind of think about. So yeah, waiting for people to ask their questions. Ask a question. Don't be shy. It's okay. If you I'm not sure. This is something that I sometimes use these live streams to get the stuff off my chest. It's kind of a bit more informal. I get this kind of a question a lot. Okay, not the exact same question, but this kind of question. Something. Oh, someone's there. Yay, in the US. I was going to say it must be the middle of the night, and then I've seen it's 4 a.m. And thanks for your super chat. Really appreciate that. Ask a question if you'd like to, or what would you like to chat about? Please, and welcome, and good to see you back again. I saw you on other streams that we've had before. So while we get to that, I'll just give you this idea, right? So asking this question in this way, like, is such and such good for such and such, or bad for such and such? like it, for instance, okay, I've done quite a few videos about dampness and people, and then, you know, milk, maybe people say, oh, milk isn't good for that, or milk is dampening. What about plant milks? What about almond milk? What about, you know, all the different bazillions of milks that there are there? So whether something is okay for you to have or not okay for you to have in terms of if it's going to create more dampness for you, let's assume that it's something like that, is so highly dependent on whatever else you eat. For instance, if a person has a typical diet, I wouldn't say this is a healthy diet at all, but this is a common diet where you eat lots of stuff that's pre-made or packets. You might cook it at home yourself, but let's say you make rice and curry or something, and you're using a jar sauces. You're using packet, you know, pasta and jar sauce pasta to make with that. And I'm not having a go at anyone here, because I used to do that all the time too. Everyone does that. Like, growing up in our family, my mum used to make a lot of foods from scratch, like a lot. But then she would also, you know, go, okay, we guess we're going to have something like, you know, that was easy to make or something. But if you have a lot of those things, you're having a lot of processed foods. Plus, if you have takeaway a few times a week, that's like a nasty takeaway, a McDonald's or a KFC or whatnot. Even every so often, those sorts of things, you're generally going to be having a lot of salt, sugar, fat, and carbohydrates in your diet. And it's not that the fat is bad. It's not that the carbs are bad. It's not that the salt is bad just in by itself, but in combination with all those things together. And then you have milk on top of that. You have a lot of milky coffees, and then you have something like, you know, that's dampening. You are going to have a big problem, because you're going to notice, like, oh, when I drink coffee, a milky coffee, I get phlegmy. Whereas someone who's on a ketogenic diet, they probably wouldn't have the milk because they're on a keto diet. But let's say that they may not get that phlegmy from that because they're not having a lot of other sugar or carbs in their diet. So you always have to have that bit of judgment when you're thinking about things in Chinese medicine, which makes it a bit harder to work out what's good for you to have and what's not good for you to have if you're already in the midst of having a diet where you're eating a lot of things that you shouldn't be eating, like ice cream, sugar, like any sort of sugar is bad. Like, and you know, it's so hard to get off that sugar train. It's just criminal how much sugar and salt, and I'm not against salt, but when it's mixed in together, those two flavors together, it makes it almost impossible to stop eating that food, like trans fats, seed oils, this kind of stuff. I mean, I saw a post recently on someone's Instagram thing that I follow, you know, who's against these kinds of foods or something, and they said, if you want to avoid seed oils, you're basically not going to be able to eat anything in the supermarket pretty much anymore, which is a good thing, right? I mean, provided you've got food coming in from somewhere else, because it's just in everything, and that's how criminal it is, and that's how bad it is. So when we think about Chinese diet therapy going back to the Han Dynasty time, they didn't have any of those things. They didn't have any packet foods. There wasn't even a supermarket to buy things. If you wanted something, you had to grow it and you had to eat it in season. And I think we have to kind of get back to that. And now's a great time to do that, because like everywhere in the world, we're facing this massive inflation, right? And I think that's a good thing not a good thing at all. I don't think it's a good thing. I think it's a horrible thing, and it's going to be horrible. It's going to get worse for people, I'm sure. But it's a good opportunity for us to reassess, why are we paying so much money for just literally shit, for literally stuff that is not good for you to eat. So there we go, rant over. That's what I do. Please ask a question to someone else if they'd like to ask something. It's probably a good idea to do that. Otherwise I might just rant on about about something else. I've just realised my Instagram screen is very dirty here, so I'm just going to give it a little clean there. phone because I was putting on so much makeup earlier today. I kind of touched the screen with my hands, fogged it up. So yeah, so this is a good opportunity to sit there and assess that and think, okay, now what do you want to do? You want to get down to the basics of what's healthy for you to have, what's within your budget for you to have, and eat the best quality of what your budget will allow you to eat. But actually, if you do eat healthily in a Chinese medicine way, it's actually not for every part, but for the most part, it's actually cheaper because you waste less food. You waste less food because you're hopefully eating it all, but you're not eating as much food in a meal. Like, you're not having to spend as much money on foods and stuff. And you treat that food better because it was more expensive, let's say. Like, so you go and buy better quality vegetables. You treat them better. You don't let them go off in your fridge because they're important to you, because they were expensive. And, you know, I used to find when I wasn't doing carnivore diet that I would buy lots of fruit and veggies, and then eventually I'd eat them, but lots would go off as well, and there would be a lot of wastage just from that because I live by myself, single person. You're not making a family's worth of meals, and sometimes you buy 3 broccolis for $5. Let me buy 3 of them, and then you couldn't eat them all by the time they go off, which was only a few days because I don't know how they know those 3 broccolis for $5. They're gonna be yellow in a few days' time. So yeah, let's have a chat about your questions. I'd like to answer your questions in the chat, and or a topic you'd like me to talk about. I can talk about the 5-element personality types. Can talk about diet therapy things. I'm just having a quick look. Here for a question. Oh, and someone asked me a question about female orgasm, and I made that video and it's being uploaded now. So I've just done that. I've just made a video about that because they were asking about like taxation for females versus males. Yep. So Holistic Goth says, I've started getting a lot of frozen organic produce, not to waste any, but it's always cheaper than, but yeah. And that's a great thing to do, like maybe form a co-op with people so that you can go and buy good quality stuff and do things where you sort it between different families or different groups or things like that. The other option you could do, like it sounds like you're kind of doing this where you're freezing, you're getting a lot of frozen organic stuff. Or like, let's say if you buy fresh stuff, you can puree it. You could cook it, puree it, and then put it into little ice cubes kind of thing and make your own stock type of thing and freeze that. They're ways of, being smarter about stuff. Recently this is one of the greatest things I've bought in terms of, I buy a lot of things and they just get wasted and you never use them. One of those bags that sucks all the air out of things and seals it, like a sealing thing. I got it from Aldi. And I use it for meat because I'm a carnivore now, so I just use it for that. But you can put you can put tea in it. For instance, I've used it for tea and herbal tea, even Chinese herbs, right? So it takes all the air out of it, and that it can make things last for a long, long time because it's taking all the air out, and the air is often what then causes like bugs to come into things. So if you had rice, and you had it, you buy it and it's kind of in that sealed I want to say freeze dried, but it's not really freeze dried, but type of bags are really it's really handy because it makes things last longer. It makes your meat last a lot longer. And I've found that if I put a few steaks, because I buy steak in a big roll, cut it up myself, put it into those bags, and then keep what I'm going to use for the next few days in the fridge. and freeze some. So if I buy it on special, I'm not sure that whether it's going to be there the next week, the special price meat. I've got spare in the freezer. That's how I've been rolling lately, and that's been working for me. And what I found is that I can't remember what it's called, the air sucking out bag kind of thing. It kind of once it's come out of the freezer, it's so much fresher than if you just wrap the meat up in Glad wrap and put it in the freezer, for sure. All right, we've got something else here. Chinese medicine has been the answer to every dead end I ever hit before learning about it. Wonder how we're going to get other holistic practitioners on board. Yeah. I'm glad to hear Chinese medicine's been helpful to you. Not glad to hear that you've hit a lot of dead ends, but we all do. The unique thing about Chinese medicine is it is a unique thing. It's its own system of medicine. And I try to get that into people's heads at the very start of teaching class to students, because like myself, when I first went to Chinese medicine school, I wasn't sure whether I'll be a naturopath or a Chinese medicine practitioner. I didn't know what the difference between the two was. And I just thought, oh, it's just a form of natural medicine. But actually, to utilize Chinese medicine, you have to live, breathe, eat, sleep, dream Chinese medicine. It's its own system, and it doesn't need Western medicine to understand how it works. Like, it makes it nice to it's a nice idea to understand Western medicine, and it's nice for patients, but you don't need Western medicine to practice Chinese medicine. It's its own standalone system. And this is kind of where, when you say get other holistic practitioners on board, there might be things that Chinese medicine practitioners are better situated to treat than, let's say, a naturopath, or let's say holistic practitioner. Could be lots of things. Could be a massage therapist who sees a patient who's, in mental distress and wants to do it naturally, or is fed up with big pharma, or being on that cycle of things. Do they go and see a naturopath? Do they see an acupuncturist? Do they see a Chinese herbalist? Even GPs. Like, actually, the GP program we have I know definitely in Perth, because I know someone who does this, and I've seen other practitioners I know in the US do this, where they call people in to go and do a talk to GPs, to especially emerging practitioners. And two years ago, I was asked to speak at a conference in Melbourne by a lady who watches the YouTube channel, and she's a medical student. She's probably graduated now. And she said, we're doing a medical conference. Can you do a 20-minute talk? This was hybrid, so I was doing it over Zoom, because I think it was 2021 and everything was in lockdown at that point, especially in Melbourne. Like, I think some were coming into the centre and some were not. Anyway, I didn't have to travel over to Melbourne. But they had like this section, and I think there was like between 1,500 or 3,000 doctors or whatever, student doctors come to this conference over this weekend. It's great to see that they're open to learning about this stuff, and also in medical schools showcasing it and saying this is what it does, and this is what it's about. A 20-minute talk is nothing in a 6-year degree of medicine, but it's better than nothing at all. And it's good that there's opportunity there. And if you're a practitioner watching this, because I know there are a lot of practitioners, especially on Instagram, there's probably more there than the YouTube channel. It's something that if you're ever asked to do that, you should never shy away from that, because it's such a great opportunity to let other professions know about what we do and how great it is. GPs and stuff kind of tend to know about this or learn about it. I'm just going to turn my aircon off. I don't need it on now. Through maybe their patient stories, patients getting better and coming back and seeing them. Although I've had some patients tell me things like, I had one lady that had back pain so severely, she went back to her, she actually needed a hip replacement. And the pain was severe. Like, the GP was sort of ignored the need to go and get the tests. And I had to kind of provide more advocacy for her and said, look, you need to go and get a test. You need your GP to actually do a bone scan, or a CT or an MRI or something. And in the end, the doctor found out that she had like such bad necrosis of her hip that she needed a hip replacement, and put her on the list to get a surgery. But prior to that, she started getting a little bit better with the acupuncture, and he said when she went back to him and said it was getting better and she's been having acupuncture, he said, oh, well, it must be the medication making it better. And she, like, none of the medication had changed. So what I'm getting at is sometimes, patients might have a good story to tell, but the person listening might not be heeding it or listening to it. So, yep. So, Holistic Goth says, glad to hear. It's a way of life. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, don't use anything Western medicine. Even a lot of chiros, even acupuncturists won't know about fundamentals. Yeah. And that's also true. I feel that there's a bit of I feel a bit despondent about our profession from time to time. Like, there's tons of great practitioners out there, and I've been teaching for a long time. And I see lots of good students go through the college. Like, for the most part, they're good. They're good people and they're good students and they care about Chinese medicine. But the courses that are being pumped out now are so heavy on Western sciences, so heavy on social sciences, and so heavy on research-based methodology. And there's nothing wrong with any of those things. They're all good things to learn. But you've only got so much time. You've only got 4 years to do that degree. And if a third's taken up with Western medicine and a third's taken up with social sciences, and then your clinical part is heavily reliant, like the marks that you get from the clinical practical are heavily reliant on you coming up with research-based methodology to support what you're doing in your treatment. And there's nothing wrong with that. But this is what's happening, certainly in the college that I teach at. This is the common thing, that there's less space for practitioners and emerging practitioners, like the students, to actually immerse themselves in the classical understandings. And a lot of practitioners themselves, and hence the teachers, not all, because I know many good ones that are teaching at colleges and they're doing a great job doing that. Good on them. That they don't even read the Neijing themselves, or they don't even know anything about it, and they don't understand it, and they don't because they don't understand it, they don't there's no incentive. There's less incentive to quote from it. And I shouldn't say that so negatively, like there's no incentive, but I would like to see colleges put more emphasis on understanding classical texts as a basis for Chinese medicine. And I would have loved to have done it like that in my own college, like when I was back in Chinese medicine school. If I created a school, that's what I would do. I would actually teach students other philosophies or give them the options to do those things as well. Like, what about learn about the Tao Te Ching? Like, what about learn just basic other like classical theoretical concepts kind of as a class. Anyway, that's rant over. That's a fourth rant for this stream. I think we're doing well. So, doing that. And like you get busy as a practitioner, and I got to that point myself in my practice where I wasn't really that invested in the further study of Chinese medicine, partly because I didn't know what to do, and that was before I'd found the college that I did the classical stuff with. And like, it's actually not that hard to get a result with acupuncture for the most part, for many conditions, right? Particularly musculoskeletal conditions. It's really hard to make a patient worse with acupuncture, whereas it's easy to make a person worse with herbs. So I kind of didn't even practice much of Chinese herbal medicine when I started. By the time I'd decided I was going to do the course that I did in classical herbs, by that point I was doing lots of acupuncture and not much herbs. And I certainly wasn't seeing patients that had serious conditions with the herbs. I was doing more fertility patients with Chinese herbs, like supporting patients' menstrual cycles. But it wasn't like life or death situations or, serious illnesses or stuff like that. I mean, I don't see a lot of life or death, thank goodness. But I see much more serious conditions now because of the system of herbs I practice. Kind of allows you to make a difference in those things without, you're not sort of floundering around wondering, am I doing the right thing for this person? For the most part. Anyway, there's another little rant. So if people would like to ask a question, this is what the stream's for. You can ask a question. If you're on Instagram, you can ask a question. Just wave to those people on there. Awesome. Cool. All right. So we've got some ideas here. So the video about female orgasm is going to come out soon. In the next couple of days, talking about essence. I'm also finishing the. Sorry, just saying if that was a question on there. It's hard to see the screen from the Instagram screen. So it's a bit far away. I'm also doing a series on emotion, so I'm going to finish that. I started it. I think I did joy and worry. So, no, someone said streams are for rants. Okay, go ahead. Yeah. It's wild how people can lose touch with lessons already learned in all areas of life. Yeah, that's true. I'm glad you like my insights. So I've really been thinking a lot actually lately about the 5 element personality types and how we can use them. I put together a course a little while ago about self-care with the 5 elements. And the idea of that is that, so I also made a video, and I'll kind of recap a little bit about that now because I think it's important. How do you make use of the personality types and those concepts, right? So one thing to know is that we all have those elemental resources inside us. We all have wood, fire, earth, metal, water characteristics in us. They're resources we can use. We can tap into those things. One of those types, one of those characteristics, one of those elements is going to be the most dominant for you. Now, for some people, when they do a test or when they're assessed by a practitioner, they almost have 2 elements almost equal. So you'll either have one that's very dominant and one that's kind of like, second dominant. And that's where, like, if you've watched videos about them or kind of read about it, you think, oh, I feel like I'm water, but I also feel like I'm wood. I'm not really sure. Well, you're probably, both of those might be neck and neck for you or very, very close together. So the first stage is to kind of understand your element type and embrace that. Don't shy away from it. Understand what that is. Find out all you can about it. Look at the strengths that element brings you. Things that you do easily, things you do with ease, things that you walk away from and you feel energized doing it. That's a strength. And then what are the weaknesses of that type? Like, is there stuff in your life that could have gone better? Have you known yourself a bit better? And then after you kind of think about who you are as a person easily, then you can kind of think, well, I can be all of these types. And that concept is considered that alchemy, right? Transcending those elements. So if people are interested in that part of things, then they need to kind of go and do more study. That's not really my area specifically, but there's a podcast called Inspired Action Podcast. It's just an audio podcast, but that's very interesting and helps you on that journey of understanding. There's a practitioner that I did an interview on my channel with, Lita Herman, and that's kind of how I found out about her podcast and that whole area of things. But this idea of like, okay, we have these elements in us and they all need nourishment in some way. Now, some need more than others for different people, and it's also more at different seasons of life. Like, let's give an example like water. What nourishes your water element is stillness. So for some people, they don't need much stillness. They still need some stillness. They might, if they're a wood type, that's me. They might be more better in the movement, and they don't like that much stillness. But they still need some stillness. And like reflection, okay, looking at yourself in the water, you see a reflection. What I love about the 5 elements is it's just nature. Like if you think about it, it makes sense. Unlike some things where you just think about it, it's like, no sense is coming to this. So it kind of, you should be able to puzzle your way through it. So like sitting by a watery pond, like that's, being around water, being in nature where you hear water. Maybe even for some people, like being in a storm, or they love the sound of the rain. Swimming, like floating in water. Like these things are going to nourish that water element. That stillness that comes within of that water. But also the water element has the nature of it being like very powerful and forceful. Like water can destroy things, right? Think about a flood. Think about a dam that's kind of kept, and then it just goes, right? Water's got a huge amount of strength, but it's also got the ability to be, so it's got a huge amount of flexibility. Think about those superheroes with the frozen man that would become liquid and then become frozen, and then become liquid and become frozen. So these are water traits that if you are a water type, then you might actually find yourself having that happen to you where you're like, oh, I feel frozen, I feel stuck. That's a water element kind of out of balance. But that's part of the nature of water. What I'm getting at is that all of these elements in us need to be nourished, no matter if that's your type or not. And that's what I was kind of talking about in the course. Like, okay, here's all these different things for water. Here's these things for wood. Acupressure points you could use. Herbs you could use, like maybe foods as medicine type of things. Please ask a question if you're watching this stream and you'd like to ask a question. It's totally fine to ask a question. Cool. All right. What else can we talk about? Motivation is probably a good thing to think about in terms of the 5 elements, like because it's the new year. Willpower, motivation. Where does that come from? How do we generate that? So wood is a big part of motivation. Knowing what you want for your life is part of the wood element. So people who are very good at planning, they're good at kind of knowing what they want. Every year they write their goals, that kind of thing. They're possibly a wood type, but that's a wood trait that you can tap into. And something you can do to help the wood element in preparation for that is exercise. So creativity, again, is another part of that. And creativity isn't just like, oh, I'm going to, write a song or do an interpretive dance. But creativity could be your ability to come up with your goals, your ability to think laterally through a problem. So if that's something that you're stuck with, if you're thinking, oh, I'm really stuck, I'd like to be able to just sit there and write my goals, but every time I do, I just sit there and it's blank. Go and do some exercise first. But you have to make a point of, as soon as you finish that exercise, you don't have to sit there in your sweaty gym clothes, but you don't go and do this and that after the exercise. You finish the exercise, you have your shower, and then you make a point of sitting there. So you're kind of doing the movement, and then you're doing the stillness of sitting there and going, okay, let me come up with those ideas. But also be prepared that the ideas could come to you while you're doing the exercise. And it's a good idea to write that down. Like, I'm a creative person in terms of my whole life there's always some idea popping in my head for something. So I just have that stuff going on my phone. I've learned that lesson from ideas popping in my head, thinking, oh, that's so great. I'll never forget that. And then half an hour later, you're like, what was that thing I thought of? I can't remember. So it's really important that you have a strategy, a system to write that stuff down and be prepared. Be prepared to write it down at the time. I think that's super important to do that. So that's a good tip if you're kind of struggling. Even it's not exactly the very start of the year, but we're also heading into Chinese New Year, right? Year of the Dragon. this is going to be a good year. Dragons are very bold kind of creatures, and should be a bold year. I mean, certainly like it's going to be a big year politically. The US kind of really drives a lot of stuff that happens through the world. Like even like I'm in Australia here, and like it's kind of like something happens in America and it kind of shatters out through the rest of the world almost still. So like it will be a big year for us, for the world, but it's also that dynamic nature of a dragon is kind of, I don't know, good. I'm feeling good about it. could be a bit of a welcome change, right? All right, so let me answer your questions. Someone says, any recommendations on cultivating and maintaining peace? Oh, what a great question. I don't know how to put that on the screen. I can put a heart with it. That is such a great question. There's a few things, I think. And I think this is really important because it's going to be something that people are constantly, they're going to be faced with it more and more. Like it's going to be in your face because there's a lot of pressure, right? So I've dealt with lots of pressure situations in my own life and in organisations that I've run. I've been a part of doing lots of volunteer work. And there's something to consider in every part of something that you should always consider is seasons, okay? So seasons of life and understanding that something doesn't last forever, but when you're in, what season are you in right now? So like if you're in a very stressful season, it might feel like your whole life is stressful, but then something worse happens. You're like, man, I wish I could just go back to the old stress because that was I could have coped. I thought I couldn't cope with that, but I can cope with it. Like to recognize that, for one, if you're going through a real difficult time, it won't last forever. It can't. It will not last forever. Something will change. You might get worse from that thing happening, but it won't stay the same. And that also teaches us to recognize when there's times to like store or to gather. This relates to Chinese medicine a little bit, but it's also like a biblical principle if you follow what's that, Song of Solomon, something like that. And that song, to everything turn, there is a season, turn. A time for everything, right? A time and a place. And that ancient wisdom kind of teaches that. But Chinese medicine also looks at that with the seasons and looks at that with like the 5 elements and things like that. Like they understand that is part of, there's a summer, there's a winter, right? And the winter is, and think about Game of Thrones, right? Winter is coming. So you prepare for the winter, and the person who didn't do any preparation, winter comes, like remember that little hen story that you were told as a kid. Now we probably need to tell that story more because that was kind of like, okay, it's cold and that person's knocking at the door saying, oh, little hen, can I get some of your acorns because I didn't collect any up. I was too busy being frivolous and having a good time and I didn't do any preparation. So if you're not in a season where it's that stressful for you, like doing things that are going to protect you, that are going to nourish you, not in a fearful way, like not worrying, oh, bad things are going to happen, I've got to, like I think that helps you maintain that peace in the chaos because you've done the things that you need to do with the things that are in your control. Okay, so a good example of that for me in my own life would be when I'm going away, let's say I had a big study trip last year and it was like 2 weeks away, which is a lot when you've got a business. I've got a lease on my property. I have to pay that whether I'm here or not. I have to worry about, be concerned that, my patients have got enough herbs to last them while I'm away, this kind of stuff. Like ordering enough stock so that I had enough, more herbs than I normally would be given out before I went away, making sure I didn't have any crazy bills come in that, you know, I couldn't afford to pay, and just lots of things, right? Lots of stuff to organise, let alone your personal stuff that you need to organise, you know, business stuff. You know, you have to do the work so I was like, okay, I know this is coming up, and I know the week before I leave is going to be stressful. I'm not going to be surprised by that. So I'm going to do everything. Now, everything doesn't always go to plan, but I was like, okay, I'm going to do everything I can in preparation for this time so that I can, and then I'm going to have a great little trip, a great little bit of a holiday as well. Actually, on the day that I left, 2 days before I left, I have a tea business, and I'd ordered stock that was meant to come, and I was waiting for it to come, and then, you know, it literally came the same day I was flying out, and I was packing this tea order an hour before I got on the plane. But I wouldn't have been able to do that had I not prepared the other stuff that I needed to kind of prepare, right? So that's just one example. I don't know if that's a good example for you, but that's one thing, right? Another thing that is important that we need to look at to help maintain peace in the chaos is the pillars of health: diet, sleep, breathing. They're the three things that help us make yang, make chi, make blood, right? Make our resource. So whatever you can do to get those things right in your life, do those things. Whatever it takes for you, right? For some people, they need to go and have a massage once a week so that they're not so stressed and they can fall asleep and they have better sleep. For some people, they need to do acupuncture regularly, and they benefit from that, right? For some people, they need to go and see a therapist to talk about their stuff from a psychological perspective. And then if they do that, they're going to have better sleep, right? Investing in a better pillow. Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be super expensive things either. It could be maintaining good relationships with people. And that's another thing that I would definitely say is part of maintaining that peace, is having an outlet for the stress, for the things that are bothering you. Having people that you can talk to is so important. Okay, so important. Hello. It's so important to have that. Like, super underrated. Okay, like having relationships, people you can go to, people you can chat with. It might be your family, it might be friends. If you don't have any of those, and you're like, Maria, I need some people, need some good people in my life. I'm so sorry that the stream isn't that smooth. It seems to be saying it's buffering. I can't do anything about it. I'll just keep talking. It might be just a bit slow at times. It's underrated, right? But it's super important, and it's going to help you. It's going to help you to have an outlet for the difficult things that happen in life, because difficult things will happen. You can't just hope that difficult things don't happen. And if they haven't happened yet, like, wait till we get through half of this year. Just inflation alone, it's a madness all over the world. Like, I don't really know exactly why. I mean, I can hazard some guesses, but this is not a political channel. Unfortunately, this is kind of it is a political issue, but it's like it's really affecting people, really, really affecting people. And that is a pressure. So there are those pressures there. So we can't sort of ignore them and sit back and think, oh, I hope those pressures don't happen to me. I hope it doesn't. And look, maybe it isn't happening to you. And if it isn't happening to you, reach out and help someone who it is happening to. Like, maybe reach out and do something kind for people, or be the person that someone else can talk to. Hedge yourself against potential financial difficulty if that's something that you're concerned about. Like, do what you've got. I'm not giving out financial advice on this channel, but like, what I'm saying is, don't think that stuff isn't going to come for you, because I think it's coming for a lot of people. I think it's part of life. So to answer this question about, how can we maintain peace against the chaos of modern life? There's so many different ways, and not all of them require financial contribution for finances, but doing the things that benefit you. So one thing would be to actually come back and know yourself. The more you know yourself, you know what benefits you. That comes back to knowing, like even within knowing, that's why I love those personality types, because it's like knowing who you are. So the same person, DG Xerix, I think that's how you say the name. Thanks so much, because I had acupuncture and I experienced a peace that I didn't know was, peace that I didn't know was possible. And I hope I don't lose it over time. I feel like I'm being able to digest things better. Yeah, okay. So that's a good thing we can talk about. That happens to a lot of people. They get this weird peace. I had a patient once tell me, I never feel this relaxed than I do when I'm having acupuncture. Like this is, as in, he wasn't saying I can never relax. He was just saying I never get this level of relaxation. There's something weird happening here. I'll tell you a little trick, okay? And this is a free thing that you can do. My teacher told me this. It kind of makes sense. It doesn't work for everyone, but it can possibly work for you. You can visualize yourself having acupuncture and get a similar effect. It's not going to be the same. It's obviously not going to cost you $100 or whatever to do this either. You need to find a quiet place where you can lie down, and it's better if it's cool, not freezing, but like cool. Like don't be lying there sweating and being really hot. Hello to the people that just jumped on the Instagram. Awesome, welcome. So this is to kind of replicate having acupuncture. Basically you're visualizing yourself having the treatment wherever the person put the needle. So often the points on the wrist are used that have that calming effect, maybe on the head. So whatever you felt during that treatment, if you felt like a floating feeling, or you felt, some people just describe it as a high feeling, it's probably easier to do this when you've had more acupuncture treatments, because you kind of understand what you feel. So for some people, they literally visualize a person doing the needling on them, like where the points are, and they visualize it, and their body can go into that relaxation kind of state. So if that works for you, you can try that. There's stuff we don't know that acupuncture does. It's really strange. Even as someone who's been doing it for 22 years, it's a strange thing that it does. It can give people an emotional release. I've seen people have a massive cry and they weren't upset before they came in for the treatment. There was nothing going on there in that way, but there's something released. There's types of acupuncture. That's not what I do, but there are styles of acupuncture which are a bit more esoteric, and they kind of help people do these big life shifts, and they kind of help you make massive life decisions. They have these categories of points in acupuncture called the 13 ghost points, and those points are the idea of the ghost is something lingering around, not a ghost as in woo, like actually a physical being, but it's like they say, like in the classical times, they would have used that word possessed by a ghost, because they say the person's acting as if they're possessed by a ghost, but they're not really. They're actually probably what we would consider a mentally ill person, like they might be having a manic episode or something. They're not themselves. They're who they truly should be. They're not themselves. So it could be someone that is actually suffering with a mental illness, but it also could be someone that just isn't themselves. And those ghost points help you. Actually, they can be treated like that. They can treat things. So quite serious business, that stuff. All right. Any other questions? Let's feel free to ask what you'd like to ask. Hopefully that does help you think about cultivating the peace in the chaos. But definitely, the more you can work on. There's this idea in Chinese medicine that if you're interfacing with the environment at all times. Okay, so that's the environment of the wind, cold, heat, dampness, all that sort of stuff. But it's also the environment of other people, other people's emotions, all the stuff that's going on in the world, all that difficulty. So you have to be strong enough to interface with that. Otherwise, you will get sick. And that's kind of creating that's that idea of like, you know, you're able to stand strong in a storm. Like the storm's all around you, but you're not blown down. You're not blown down. I also don't think you can underestimate the power of a spiritual aspect in this, whatever that means for you, right? So if you believe in God, Jesus, that's, you know, it's obviously going to be a part of your life. But if you haven't made that connection of something beyond yourself, whatever that is for you, there's something super powerful about that. And that can take the form of in many ways for people, but that's kind of helps you transcend beyond, like you're still responsible for things. I'm not saying abdicate responsibility, but there's almost like, okay, there's something else beyond me that's got more power than me that I can reach out to. That's what I'm getting at. If you have a faith, or if you have had a faith in the past, that might be something to get back in touch with, or explore that idea, you know, to help you cope with the chaos of modern life, and you know, just getting your diet right, and getting your just staying away from toxic chemicals and in foods and stuff. Cooking for yourself, eating whole foods. Staying away from seed oils and processed foods, sugar, because it's madness, just how it affects people. Such a drug, crack cocaine. That's what sugar is. All right, other questions. Let me see what I've got here. If you're on Instagram and you'd like to ask a question, feel free to ask a question. All right. What have we got here? Someone said, brilliant mind over matter tip. Yeah, and the esoteric stuff, it is fantastic. It really is so much energy work in TCM. Being curious, what's your most challenging or most complicated? Wow, okay. What's the most challenging or complicated patient you've treated? Let me have a think. Like, so I have to be careful answering this question, because in Australia we have these guidelines through APRA where you're not allowed to do patient testimonials, right, or purported testimonials, which is me telling a patient's story. I mean, technically it's a good story. it's a good, like, a, you know, so I can't give I couldn't tell you a specific scenario of a patient. I mean, I wouldn't be breaking their confidentiality if it was, you know, like I wouldn't give enough details to break someone's confidentiality. So it's not that reason. So I'll give you types of patients that I found difficult, or what's the complication, rather than an actual specific person. The most complicated thing I find is, or the most difficult thing I find in practice is probably when a person has a lot of stuff going on. I want to help them. I can see they're in pain, especially people who have pain. Like I've actually had a few patients over the years where pain is something that Chinese, especially acupuncture, usually can just treat it. And I expect I'm going to do the treatment and the pain's going to go away, or at least go down. I had a patient who had shingles, like really badly, and it was very, what was good is that she persevered with the treatment, and had a lot of treatments, but I had to pull out every trick in the book type of thing because I wanted her pain to go down. Like, of course I did, but I just was like, it was severe. Like, it was just like, couldn't, it was in her head, and she couldn't, even if you sort of flicked her hair, it would be incredibly painful. And that, when you see someone in pain, I don't like that. I don't think anyone likes that, but I don't like seeing people in pain when you haven't been able to help them, right? So I'm used to seeing people in extreme pain, but then at the end of the treatment, they get off and they're like, "Oh, I feel a bit better." Like that's the more common thing that happens. It doesn't happen every time for sure, but then when it doesn't happen, you're kind of like scratching your head, thinking, "Oh, okay, well, it might just be a dose related thing," which can be the case. So with this patient, it was like she had to come in 3 times a week for at least 3 weeks. And it was getting better after 2 weeks of treatment, but it took that long for something to happen, really, like significantly, or, yeah. And I used moxibustion on her as well on that case, which I use a lot for pain, but I wouldn't in the past have used it for shingles. But that's not the example I was thinking of in general. Like, I don't. The most complicated thing for me is when I see someone who's really, they're in pain, they've got lots going on, and they do acupuncture or herbs one time, and then you don't see them again, because they didn't get a good result the first time, and it's often a process. And I'm super committed to that process. Like, I want to know how you felt. I want to, at least with the style of herbs I practice, if a person got worse from something, there's a really, that's a really good indicator of what to give them next, like a good indicator. And I would make someone take a herbal formula that's making them worse for a long time. Like if that's happened, maybe that I hopefully have told them they should call me, and we might change up their formula like straight away. But I think it's because sometimes people I've seen a number of these kinds of patients where they've obviously had the problem for a long time, and they give acupuncture one time. They give it a one chance, literally. If it didn't help them significantly on that one time, or the herbs on that one visit, it's like they disappear and you don't see them again. And you feel like we had a good rapport in the consult. Well, that's at least on my part, I do. And I feel like sometimes people give Western medicine a lot more chances than they give Chinese medicine. Like, a lot more chances. Like, they will endure various side effects from medication, and maybe it's because the out-of-pocket expense is less. Like, if a person goes on a drug in Australia and it's covered by Medicare, they're only paying, $6 a script or whatever it is. I don't know. I haven't gotten a script for years and years, but something like that. It's not expensive, right? Maybe $10. Who knows? It's not hundreds of dollars. Whereas if they take Chinese herbs, they're going to pay $100 for 2 weeks of herbs, something like that, right? In US dollars, it might be $50 for 2 weeks. So they're going to pay $30 US a week for herbs, maybe. It might be more in the US, something like that. And, $100, a few $100 for a consultation, maybe, and an acupuncture treatment. Can they get any of that money back from their private insurer? All these kinds of things. So I understand, like, maybe they don't know they don't know what's going to happen, and so they don't persist on with the treatment. How to build a patient's trust in that the system is right for them is kind of, that's the concern. That's the most complicated patient I've treated, those types of patients. Because part of me wants to help them, and I'm just like, I don't want you to be like, I don't want you to, it's not that they went away because something else happened. They found some other better thing. If that happened, that's great. Like, if they found something else that helped them, I'd be so happy for them. But often these people are not. I have seen a few patients with really chronic pain, not many, but a few that it just could not, nothing stopped it. Like, acupuncture maybe a little bit at the start of the treatment, but then it was still there, and that is also frustrating. Again, because you kind of know acupuncture is so well known for treating pain, and these are patients that maybe have even taken herbs or something like that. And sometimes I wonder, is there like a psychological component to things where people have lived with pain for so long, or some kind of brain issue where not psychological as in they're making it up, but they're actually feel, because pain's a subjective thing. It's super challenging, but I enjoy doing it, and really grateful that people entrust their care to me. And there's definitely there's way more good cases than these kind of challenging ones, but they come along every so often. Yeah, that's a good question. Does anyone else have a question? Does anyone else want to ask a question? Got some more people joining in on Instagram. I hope you're all doing well, wherever you are in the world. Maybe some people are probably in Australia or the UK. Just looking for some other questions, if there's anything else I wanted to answer. Yeah, don't know. There might not be anything else. Okay, someone says, is it normal that I feel like my face is more symmetrical after acupuncture? Yeah, I've not heard anyone say that, but it is a weird thing. Like, I have felt something myself, not from acupuncture, but sometimes I've felt like, I feel like one side of my face doesn't feel the same as the other side, like very temporarily. I think I do know that some patients experience some people experience the sensations of acupuncture much more quickly, much more easily, like wholeheartedly than other people, and we don't really know why that is. Maybe they're more in tune with their body. There is a thing if it's your first time to have acupuncture versus you've had it before. If it's your first time, it's often takes a while for a few treatments even for you to feel something. Maybe the feeling of more symmetrical could be there could have been some kind of blockage there that's been moved, and you don't have that blockage in that area, that a blockage in one of the channels. So people probably aren't aware really that a lot of the channels of the arms and the channels that go on the hands and the legs, which are mostly where the points go, have acupuncture points on the face. So you might have a point, for instance, on your hand, and it actually has, like, your large intestine channel actually, goes onto your face here, and it also has an internal connection with your stomach channel, which is kind of on the side of your face. And so, you could be having a point in your hand or a point, this. Not every channel goes on the face, but a lot of channels go on the face. Yeah. So that's a cool thing, and it's good that you're aware. Like, it's a cool awareness. Yeah. Yes. A holistic goth said, I think taking accountability is hard for a lot of people. Just to know that they could fix it and they don't need to suffer to that extent. Yeah. Yeah, and it's hard to also give people like you want to. I don't like misleading people at all. Like, I'm just like, all I can do is the best I can do, and we'll see what your body does. Like, all we can do is give it the herbs, and we'll see what happens. And I can say, like, in my experience, people need, like, I could definitely say, like, in my experience, people need to have 3 or 4 treatments before they generally expect something to happen. And I would tell that to most new patients. I usually under expect it, and then if they come back the next week and like, I feel so much better, well, that's great. that's awesome. I want you to get better as quick as possible. Yeah, I don't know. There's also a thing in psychology called illness behavior. It sounds really bad, doesn't it? That people, and this is part of it, part of pain behavior. And I'm not thinking like these people that pop in my mind, like I don't know if that was the case for them. When you've had something for so long, it becomes a part of who you are, right? And you'll hear this with people's language, and be careful about this yourself. If you're someone that's a bit self-aware and you've got this far on the stream, you probably are. Be careful how you talk about illness in relation to yourself. So if people say, oh, my fibromyalgia or my arthritis, like it's a part of them, right? Rather than something that's happened to them or something that's transient. Now, I understand that you have to, there's also different ways of thinking, but this is my way of thinking. I don't think that's a healthy way of doing that, because I don't want anything to be wrong with me. Like, I'm not going to, acknowledge, I'm not going to make arthritis a part of my life. Make arthritis a part of your life. But people who've been diagnosed with arthritis, they're told by Western medicine, you're going to have this for the rest of your life, and you need to deal with this. You need to have this medicine for the rest of your life. Whereas in Chinese medicine, they don't actually subscribe to that kind of understanding of that you have to have something for the rest of your life. Like it's not, I'm not saying we've got some miracle cure that is, I'm not trying to make that kind of a claim, but I'm saying the understanding of the way of thinking isn't that you own this illness. It's like your body has the ability to fight the environment, to fight, to raise its function. And it's also got to do with getting things early enough. Before that person got that diagnosis of arthritis, they would have had some pain. They would have had some joint pain. They would have had something that they didn't feel right, and they might have ignored it. Or even if they did, they've gone to the doctor and, but the doctor doesn't really have anything for like, oh, my little finger feels a tiny bit sore. Oh, well, there's nothing to worry about there. So then people are dismissed. They don't go to the GP for those little things. Whereas with Chinese medicine, they treat those things early. We don't know, are we treating people with potential arthritis? Are we, are you preventing those things from even occurring? Some of this stuff is genetic, right? Like it's an epigenetic situation where it's been turned on, the genes have turned on, and now that person's got that thing. Now, is there something about catching something early enough where it means that those genetic things aren't turned on? That's an interesting idea. I don't know. Like you can't research that. You can't know. So what I'm saying is we're taught, in a Western sense, Western country, people are taught that you're going to have this forever. This is part of who you are. And so then you hear patients say, oh, my chronic fatigue syndrome, my this, my that, or my depression, like especially something that could be quite transient or come and go. If you don't have clinical depression and you just feel a bit depressed, be careful that you don't label yourself as having something, and then you're owning it and you're putting that on you every time you say it. Like it makes it harder to break away from it. And you have to stop yourself from doing it, because it's easy to do it, It's, especially when you have something all the time, it never goes away. Why wouldn't you own it? Why wouldn't you make it a part of who you are? But that's a very powerful tool to kind of help start that journey away from that kind of language, right? Like, you can say, I've got pain today. I've got back pain today, but not like, oh, my old back pain, like it's your little friend that's come to visit you. It's not something you want to be friendly with. Again, here's another rant. Rant alert coming. But that's something, and I think that's also part of people's upbringing. Maybe their awareness, like you might have done some, I don't know, gone to a Tony Robbins seminar or something like that, where you've kind of learned something that's helped you with your language. NLP, I don't know anything about NLP, but I think it is. I have a feeling it's part of that. Language, because it's called neuro-linguistic programming, so it's got to be about language changing. So that kind of stuff where you're catching yourself, in the act of saying something, and you go, right, I'm going to switch that language. I'm not going to use that language, so that you're not reiterating that issue, that problem. I think think that's quite a powerful thing to do. Yeah. Because also Western medicine kind of glorifies that, and social media does as well. You know, like, oh, I'm a cancer warrior. I'm a, you know, a so-and-so fight. I'm a, you know, this, like, you know, like it's incentivized on social media to be sick, to have an illness, to have something wrong with you. You know, I'm not saying there's lots of good things that can come from that as well, because people might, you know, awareness might need to be made about things that people aren't aware of. But is that your identity? Is that who you are? Yeah. So yeah, Holistic Goth said, it's like a doctor putting a curse on people to tell them they're stuck. Yeah. Diseases are collections of symptoms, and you can change your symptoms. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. And that's also a big difference between a disease and a syndrome, right? So a disease is something that can be detected some way through some kind of test, and it's pretty definitive that disease. Like, there's lots of things now that are diagnosed as syndromes, and those things can change so easily based on different symptoms. So a good example for that would be something like fibromyalgia, and chronic fatigue syndrome. They're very similar. They're both syndromes. They're not diseases. Like, there's no blood test for fibromyalgia. Hypertension, high blood pressure, you can test someone's blood pressure and you know that it's high. And then there's a criteria. Okay, is it high a certain number of times when it's, you know, when it's been checked, something like that? Then, you know, then the diagnosis could be made. I'm not saying that that's good either. You know, you wouldn't want to go around saying, oh, my hypertension. But these syndromes come and go, like change like the wind sometimes for people, especially mental health ones, because they're inventing new ones all the time, or reclassifying new ones all the time. Yeah, that's true. If we put the funds into the disease research, into TCM, yeah, and that's it's kind of disheartening in a way that, like, there's no money in individualized healthcare, and that's what Chinese medicine is, right? Like, you know, even like I get upset seeing a lot of over-the-counter medicine being used by Chinese medicine, because I think I see that being abused sometimes, like patients taking yin chow san for months and months and months, and they don't really need it, but they feel a bit better taking it, and they, you know, take these and they think, oh, it's natural, so it must be safe, it must be good. Well, it's not. It's neither of those things. It's actually not natural to take a collection of like 12 different herbs ground into a powder and mixed into a pill and take them at a massive dose. Yes, it's more natural than drugs, which are like a few steps away from, you know, few steps on from that process. But it's not natural. Like, it's natural to eat an orange. It's not natural to take Chinese herbs. It is a kind of a natural medicine. It comes from plants for the most part. But what I'm getting at is it's not something that you should dabble around with by yourself. And yeah, if there was a lot of money in that, then there might be money to fund those things, because that's where the money is. It's in people being able to just access the medicine. Like the company who makes that stuff would have to fund it, the research. Yeah, but there's not a lot of money in research for Chinese medicine, because the outcome of like how it's dispensed out is individual practitioners. So you'd have to have a group of practitioners all put together with a similar interest and go, okay, we want this disease researched, like acupuncture for, you know, depression. Let's do a research study, and all the doctors, like, you get 1,000 TCM doctors, and they all put $100 in, and then you hire a researcher, and, you know, they do the research. And you could even argue that that's like, you know, there's a conflict of interest there, because practitioners obviously want a good outcome to happen from it. Although these, you know, companies that have big pharma funding them, there's a conflict of interest there too. So that's an issue, right? If you with Chinese medicine. So just to sort of, yeah, we're answering this question, sort of having a chat about this issue. Yeah, if the funds from that were, you know, directed into some of those Western medicine things could be directed into Chinese medicine things, there might be a different story that, you know, you would know. hello, Bondi Road to Health. If you want to ask a question, you're welcome to ask a question on Instagram. Yeah, it would be great if there could be better outcomes, especially in Australia. We are reliant on having research papers, published papers that are of a certain standard to be able to say, make what we call a therapeutic claim about a treatment. And that's a big downside in practicing in Australia versus practicing in other countries. So there, like, basically there's only 7 or so conditions that practitioners can technically advertise as conditions we treat, because the Chinese Medicine Board deems those ones that there is what they deem sufficient evidence to make a claim about the treatment. That's why I was partly the other question about, talking about something that might mention. One is I can't mention anything that might be indicating a patient testimonial, but also I'm very hesitant to sort of insinuate a claim of a treatment for a condition. Like, I don't even want to insinuate that because it's so choking. I feel choked by APRA. I feel like they've got their hands around my throat sometimes. But I'm doing the best I can to kind of spread the word about Chinese medicine, and that's one of the reasons why I do this channel. All right, thanks for your questions, D Zurich. Got to go to sleep now. Yeah, you're a student. Yep, go and have a good night's sleep. Restore your yang. It's very early here in Perth. It's only 6:30 where I am. Originally from Colombia. How interesting. Cool. I hope you enjoy your studies. Thanks for joining the stream, and thanks for your questions. If people on the Instagram have a question, you're welcome to ask it. We've been chatting about all kinds of stuff here. Yeah, I was just recently, like, all that APRA stuff is in my mind at the moment because I was last night on my own, not last night, yesterday, I spent the whole day doing my website, trying to look at the SEO of things, and like then just revisiting those regulations and stuff, and just, yeah, it gets your bee in a bonnet. Gets my bee. Gets a bee in my bonnet about that. Yeah, so it's something that we have to contend with as a profession, for sure. Yeah, so maybe we just talk about things that are not related to that. If someone has a question about Chinese medicine, I'll answer it for you. Got a few more minutes left on this stream if there's any more questions. Just going through these other ones if I've got some left here to answer. Yeah, so maybe there's no more questions here. Just having a quick look. Just going to jump into the back end of my channel and have a quick look at the other questions there. If you haven't subscribed already, make sure you click the subscribe button. That's a good thing to say. All your dreams will come true. Yeah, I'm trying to get 1,000. I'm trying to get 10,000 subscribers on YouTube this year. I'd love to do that. I'd love to get one of those little plaques that they give you for 100,000 subscribers. I'm not sure if there are 100,000 people that love to listen to me talk for this long or talk about Chinese medicine. But that would be super cool. All right, someone's got a question about caffeine and hair loss in men. This was on my video about coffee. Is it good or bad in Chinese medicine? Can coffee or caffeine cause hair loss in men? Does it restrict blood flow to the head or the scalp? So one of the things I talk about in the hair loss video that I made was, oh, you want to talk about my tea business? Yeah, we can talk about that. I'll just quickly answer this one's very quick answer. Like, what causes hair loss in one sense is like yang being deficient floating up to the scalp, right? And when people drink too much coffee, they are going to deplete their yang. And that would be when someone drinks a lot of coffee and they kind of like get all anxious or jittery or stuff like that, or even sometimes hot or their heart races. That can cause a floating up of yang, and that would make the hair, the scalp get hotter, and the hair fall out. What would you like to know about my tea business? You love the teapots in the background. Yeah, I'll show you these little ones. I collected these when this is an old one. I think, this is a cool, I really actually love this teapot. This is Crown Devon in England. I used to have a retro store. Like, I used to have a store called Retrotastic. So when I was saying before about getting into Chinese medicine and getting to that point where I did the classical Chinese medicine, just before that, I started getting into other businesses because I'm a creative person. I'm a wood type of person. I need a lot of shit going on in my life. And I ran this retro store, and I used to go around to op shops and buy things and resell them. And that was back in the day where op shops, things were cheap enough to kind of resell them. And I think this had a set. I'm pretty sure there was a set with this. But I just love the shape of this teapot, because some teapots, I'll show you another one, they don't have a great shape. Or they're too big. So this is a great shaped teapot, but it's a bit too big. I will drink tea out of this, but this is like a family teapot, not a one-person teapot. So this one is Garden Bouquet. What does it say on there? I can't see because I've got dim lighting in here. Windsor Ware. Johnson Brothers, England. Okay, right. So that's this is Crown Devon, England. Now, these also remind me a bit of my nana. Like, my nana's passed away now. She died when she was 101. Bless her heart. But she used to always give us cups of tea, and just this little sound. It's more the tea, the cup on the thing. Like, so I don't want to show my age too much, but 40 years ago, when I was younger, maybe a bit less than that, maybe 35 years ago. Oh, let's say 40 years ago. I would have been sleeping over at my nana's house, and she would come in the morning with this tray and she would have little teacups that were gold, and she would bring them in, and she would bring, because she was very English, like half English, half Scottish, but very English proper. And she'll bring the little, the tea, bring tea in a teapot for us, and we would then get out of bed in the morning and have tea and scones, or whatever in the morning, that she would bring our breakfast into the room, sort of thing. We'll bring tea, like first thing in the morning. I remember that, and she would, oh, I've got your tea for you. Bring the teapot in, and you'd sit there and very quietly have your morning. Literally, you've just woken up, have your morning tea. And then I think then you'd come out and have breakfast, and my granddad would make what he called a googie egg, which is like a dippy egg. So that's like a hard-boiled egg that's not properly hard-boiled, and then you have a little face on it, and you cut it off, and then you dip your soldiers, which is your bread, in there. Good memories. Anyway, so I've always liked these kinds of things, but I have a herbal tea business that I started when I was doing my retail shop. So I basically, when I started Chinese medicine, my second premises had a big 45 square meter shop at the front, actually two of those. I didn't have a store. I just had a big giant waiting room, and I had two literally 90 square meters of space that I'd leased out just how it was. And the area became better and better as time went on. And so I created 2 shops. I created a retro store called Retrotastic, and that's how I used to have so many different. I've actually got a whole thing down here somewhere of different little teacups and stuff. Yeah, and then I started a natural health store, and that's how I started making herbal teas. So I have a website called metrohealth.com.au, and that's all the herbal teas and stuff are on there. But I can only really ship those out to Australia because as the shipping is super expensive to the US, it's not worth you getting products over to the US from me. But yeah, herbal teas are fun. Herbal teas are good. So they're my some of my teapots. Teapots are cool. Yep. Yep, these have gone. That was even a little bit dusty, and I like the sound. Like, this is porcelain. This stuff. I really actually like fine bone china. I prefer to drink out of fine bone china, but you wouldn't need a teapot made of fine bone china. It would be too. Wouldn't be as robust and probably too expensive. But yeah, I can tell the difference by touching them. Like like that's the sound of porcelain, and the thickness of it. So then along my journey, when I was making my herbal teas, my next door neighbour to my business in Maylands had a massive Chinese furniture importing business, and a few times I would go to China with them. And then we got to kind of go on these trips, and he started a tea business that he still runs now. And as part of, like, we would just go to China together because it was kind of good to travel together and go to Canton Fair a few times, and I've gone to like so many like factories. I've been to the factory in China that makes Versace teapots. That was interesting. Just so you know, they also make the $2 teapots as well. They make Versace and they make the other ones. So yeah, I've done a lot of business things. It's all good when it's do this stuff for fun and enjoy yourself. Yeah, but I still love Chinese medicine. Cool. All right, so we might end the stream, I think, now. Unless there's any other questions. Anyone else want to ask a question? Yeah. So you want to to get a good pot, right? I mean, these are old. So go to op shops and look for one and find one that looks nice to you. I think that's part of it. But porcelain or fine bone china are good. The other teapot I use is glass, and I have a little burner that kind of keeps it hot underneath, so you can put a candle and keep it hot. And that's the ones I use regularly. But if you're into Chinese tea, where is it? It's underneath here. Should actually be a little one. Like, this is a Gong Fu teapot. So these are for oolong tea. And these are fairly cheap. Like, they shouldn't be super expensive. Although I didn't realize until I'd been to China a few times that these are collectible there too. And what's happened to my microphone stand? Some of these people are selling these teapots for thousands of dollars, like different, like special china, special porcelain, something like that. Anyway, this is completely different. But oolong tea, sort of, you have a certain way that you make it, and you wouldn't let it sit in a big pot like this. So if you're doing English tea, you'd let it sit in the pot for ages and let it brew there. Whereas with oolong tea, what you want to do is you put the tea in there, you fill it up, and you pour the whole thing out, and then you take this off so that it's not sort of fermenting or affecting the tea. And then you pour the hot water in, you let it, like, I actually have a little timer down there on my tea set thing. So like when you do oolong tea properly, you're supposed to leave it in for only a certain amount of time. So that then you taste the 3 different flavors of the tea. So this is if you're really into oolong tea or something like that. right? If you just sort of like English tea, or you don't really care, the longer you leave the tea in the pot, the more stronger it gets, and it sometimes can get bitter. So these are designed for black tea, really, because you put the tea in there, and you could even put tea bags in there if that's what you want to do, and then you just leave it in, let it sit there. Cool. But yeah, there's something nice about old things, I think. It's nice. All right. Well, I hope you're doing well. Everyone else, thank you for your the super chat, and thanks for your questions. I really had fun tonight, and yeah, I'll do these more often. That's what I say every time, and then and then I won't do a stream for ages. I actually lost my cord. Well, not lost. I broke the cord that connects to my camera. Got broken, and it just wasn't reliable. It'd plug in and it'd just turn off. So that's one of the reasons why I haven't. I just went to the computer store the other day and got a new cord. So there's no excuse now. I can just put my camera on any time and stream. All right. So make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And thank you. Have a great night or day. If you're in the US, it's morning. Go and have some tea and get going. Thanks, everyone.